Hello everyone! Welcome back to a very special video. I'm DTM as always, and for the past month, I've been playing the 100 line Last Defense Academy. For those that don't know, it's probably best described as Danganronpa / Zero Escape crossed with Fire Emblem. It is created by Kazutaka Kodaka, the creator of Danganronpa, and Kotaro Uchikoshi, the creator of Zero Escape, and features a strategy RPG battle system interwoven with visual novel storytelling of the Danganronpa variety. As someone who is a fan of all three of the franchises, I was very hyped for this game, and after completely finishing it, 100%ing everything, I can safely say that it did not disappoint at all, and I would definitely recommend it to any fan of those series. So for this video, I'll be doing a review of this game. Don't worry, we'll stick with non-spoiler stuff first, and I'll be very clear and give a big warning when the spoilers will happen. I'll mainly be talking about two things, which are the battle system and the story. The story section itself being split into a non-spoiler and a spoiler section. I do go a bit more in depth in my blog post, which is basically this review in text form. So if you want to check that out, the link will be in the description. But without further ado, let us begin. So when I initially saw footage of this game, I was not that hyped for an SRPG element in my mystery visual novel game. Like, I follow these people for the story, not the gameplay, so I was thinking that the battle system would just be like filler stuff and not that deep. Boy, was I wrong. The battle system in this game is actually so good. Dare I say it is better than Fire Emblem? I did do a previous video comparing this game's battle system to Fire Emblem, which you can check out in the description. Ultimately, for this review, I want to talk about four main components of this battle system. Those are actions not being tied to characters but to AP, certain enemies awarding AP, unique attacks or skills per character, and finally, voltage. So in Fire Emblem, each character can only act once per turn, unless they are danced. Therefore, the number of actions you have is tied to the number of characters. This is not the case in this game. Here, actions are tied to the amount of AP, or ability points you have. Any action you do that's not like consuming an item will cost 1 AP. Okay, you might say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, the important thing to note is the implication on character actions. Since the number of actions you have is not tied to the character, you do not need to restrict characters from only being able to act once. Therefore, the system grants players more freedom in allowing characters to act multiple times if the situation wants it to. Now, it's just not all free win spam or unlimited. After a character acts once, they become fatigued, meaning that their movement is restricted to 1. What this does is emphasize the importance of positioning, especially for that initial action of a character. If you can position correctly, you can have a character basically perform combos, working within the limited movement of fatigue to attack multiple times in efficient ways. These combos provide a huge satisfactory feeling when one pulls it off, and rewards that skill for players, giving that dopamine when it gets pulled off. It also emphasizes the player phase, which I personally really like because it gives the player more agency and makes it more engaging in my opinion. And this system of AP actions allows for that really well. In conjunction with that, the system of AP also leads into the fact that certain enemies, which I'll call big enemies, award the player AP upon their defeat. So during your turn, if in one action you kill a big enemy, you essentially have a net 0 loss of AP. And if you are able to kill multiple big enemies in one action, you can gain AP for the current turn, allowing you to act even more. This does two things. The first is that it again enhances that feeling of doing combos. Gaining more actions by defeating the right enemies and continuing that steamroll is really satisfying if you're able to pull it off. The second is that it increases the strategic dynamic of target selection. It makes the decision of which enemies to target more interesting. Should you target the enemies closest to the base so that they don't reach and damage it? Should you target the boss? Or should you target the big enemies, which can then give you more actions to defeat even more enemies through those combos? That example shows how the target selection dimension of strategy is enhanced by the fact that certain enemies award AP. All of this continues to further emphasize the player phase and makes the player more active in these sorts of strategic decisions, which in turn makes it more satisfying when the player can pull off like a really cool maneuver or combo. It's like Gale Force, but emphasizing target selection. The next component, and in my opinion the most impactful one, is that we have the fact that each character has their own set of unique attacking skills, each with different ranges and effects. I want to first emphasize the different ranges. In Fire Emblem, unless you are using like bolting or something, characters only attack adjacent enemies and or enemies one space away from them, and they can only attack one enemy at a time. In this game, every attack has different ranges, and they are all area of effect. For instance, Takumi has an attack that attacks all enemies in a horizontal line in front of him, whereas Kiyoshika has an attack that attacks all enemies in like a V-shaped range. This allows each character to have more character in their gameplay, making each unit stand out more and perhaps integrating their personalities into the actual gameplay, which is really nice. In addition, this also combines with the above 2 points in making positioning very important, with the considerations of characters being able to attack multiple times, albeit fatigued, and the character's arsenal of attacks. If you position correctly, you can have like really cool combos taking out swaths of enemies with a single character. The different ranges fit in really nicely with an emphasis on positioning and the player phase. Of course, each attack a character has not only differs in ranges, but also attack power and effects. This helps with balancing, as you can have a very high attack power attack, but that attack has like one range or something. And I think this game does that really well. And of course, the different attack powers and effects and ranges make each character feel more unique and allows their own personalities to shine in actual gameplay, with that, gameplay story integration. Fire Emblem sort of has that, like recently with personal skills and different stat growths, but I feel this game does that aspect a lot better. And also this game also has personal passive skills too, so, Having each character have their own arsenal of attacks also means that there are certain synergies or groupings that you can figure out and try. It is rewarding figuring out good pairings and follow-ups. Figuring out the best way to use the different ranges and effects to most efficiently defeat enemies becomes like a strategy puzzle, which is really rewarding. The final component of the battle system I want to talk about is voltage. As you perform actions, you gain voltage in a voltage meter. Different actions fill the voltage meter by different amounts. Once the meter becomes 100% or more, 2 new options become available to every character. The first is the ability to use a Hemoanima skill. There are many different types, all shared by all the characters, including one that boosts your attack. But my personal favorite is the one that heals fatigue and grants you 1 AP. I like this for obvious reasons. It makes you think more in depth about the actions you try to take to fill that meter so you can do more actions, which in turn gives the player more agency and emphasizes that player phase. It enables more cool combos, which in turn feels more satisfying. The second is the ability to use a special attack. Each character has their own unique special attack, which is a super powerful attack with a pretty large range. However, after you use a special attack, you become stunned, meaning you can't use that character at all, not even move them, for the current turn and next turn. This special attack again gives each character their own unique flavor, and is of course really cool, style-wise. But the important thing is that it enhances the strategic decision-making process of how to attack. Like, do I use a special attack to attack this huge group of enemies with a lot of big enemies to gain a lot of AP in return for not being able to use this character for a while? There's nice interplay there. With these 2 new options, managing the voltmeter becomes a really interesting strategic dynamic and factors into that decision-making process, increasing the depth of the battle and strategy. Now, there are other aspects of the battle system. I hear you last CL enjoyers, but these are the ones I want to talk about. Putting it all together, all of those components above enable the player to pull off some really satisfying plays. For instance, one of my favorite pairings is Nozomi and Takumi. Nozomi is a healer character with the unique attribute of having a skill that is the only way to heal stun. Takumi, meanwhile, has an extremely good and powerful special attack. So one thing I like to do is stack the voltmeter to like 200%. Have Takumi fire a special attack, heal the stun with Nozomi, and have Takumi fire another special attack. with the large range of Takumi's special attack, if I can do it right, I can get so much AP from that, or just deal so much damage to like the boss. This combo is honestly extremely satisfying, and you can watch a video of this put into action. Again, in the description, I did post a video about that. There are, of course, more dynamics, pairings, synergies, interplays, and things I like to do, but I think that highlights how the combination of all those components make for a really engaging and deep battle system, one that greatly exceeded my expectations. Alright, now we are getting into the story. For this section, I will try not to spoil anything at all, not even at like a high level with like themes and such. I'll just describe my opinion without saying anything, so this will be interesting. Overall, I think the core story of this game is extremely good and compelling. The mysteries I think were well set up and the reveals were both shocking and satisfying. I really started to get invested into the world of the story and wanted to learn more about it, not just because of the mysteries, but because I think both Kodaka and Uchikoshi did a really good job at making it feel alive and having a lot of depth. There were aspects that I do wish were explored more, and there were definitely parts that felt underdeveloped. But overall, they did a really good job with the narrative of this game. I think they also did a really good job with the themes of this story. The themes of this story are very compelling and emotionally resonant. You really feel that the themes present have a lot of meaning behind it, and for the most part, each facet of the lore and mystery enhances that. I also think the characters in this game overall are really compelling. There are definitely some characters I do not like, but most characters I do really like, and their journeys and struggles do resonate with me. Each character is definitely distinctive in that Danganronpa-esque style, but also has the impression of depth, which I think works really well. Again, there are some characters I do not like, and some that I do feel are underdeveloped, but for the most part, Kodaka and Uchikoshi did a good job with the characters. I do think the story of this game is a bit too big for its own good, to say it lightly. There are definitely aspects of the story that either felt like a drag or weren't that good, which I mainly place blame on the ambitious nature of the game. It's kind of similar to Fire Emblem Three Houses, in that the huge ambition of the story resulted in most routes of Three Houses feeling a bit lackluster. I don't think this game suffers to that extent at all. Again, I do think most aspects of the story are either good to absolute cinema, but there are certainly times where it does suffer. Ultimately though, the core story is extremely good and compelling, as I mentioned before. The story is what I was hyped about when I learned about this game being headed by Kodaka and Uchikoshi, so I'm very glad that I liked it to that extent. I honestly think the core story is better than any Danganronpa game, and is among the likes of Zero Escape. This truly feels like the two of them took the best parts from each other and developed something wonderful. For any fan of Danganronpa or Zero Escape, I definitely recommend buying this game and playing it for yourself. Okay, the next section is the spoiler section, and it will be all spoilers, so if you want to be unspoiled, leave now. This is your final warning. You have been warned. Okay, I think everyone's gone now. Hopefully by now, if you haven't finished the game, you are gone, because not only will there be spoilers, but it will also be really hard to follow along as I talk about spoiler stuff for this review, as I do assume you will have the context. So yeah, by now, if you haven't left yet, you're okay with spoilers. Thanks. So yeah, this game has multiple routes and endings, 100 different endings in fact. So this spoiler story review will just be on like the high level world, mystery themes, character, etc. Talking about each individual route probably deserves its own video that I might make in the future. If you want to be early in seeing my individual route thoughts, it is in that blog post review linked in the description, so check that out if you are interested. Yeah, as I said before, the mystery and world of this game is one that I really enjoy. The world and planet of Futurum feels alive and has a lot of depth in terms of the mysteries of the planet and the Futuran civilization and mythology. There are so many aspects that are developed, from the scriptures of the G, to the box of blessings and calamity, to Cryptoglobin and its religious significance, and to each of the commanders. There's just a lot of lore that is compelling to learn more about. One aspect that I really liked was the Rebellion group. Seeing that really highlighted the different interplays and factions, instead of everything instead of having everything all monolith. It really feels like a civilization that is alive. The truth of the cast's origins was very shocking, but I think really well done. Learning that we were literally made and born for war with Shion's genetic data to be able to use hemoanima works really well with the overall themes of war this game has. It felt very tragic learning that the class was deliberately implanted with memories to have someone to care about, to protect in order to motivate them to fight. Learning that it was all a lie and part of the Exodus scheme, specifically learning that Karua doesn't exist, that was heartbreaking. But I really liked how, in the end, they still treasured those memories, recognizing that even though it was implanted, it was still a part of them and helped shape who they are. And yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but I think the themes of this game hit really hard. Every aspect of the mystery, it feels like it is in service to the themes of war, colonialism, and genocide. With humanity escaping Earth due to world death, probably oblique reference to climate change, and finding Futurim, only to find it already inhabited by the native Futurans, the Exodus project aims to wipe out all current life on Futurim with the Undying Flame, and have the cast unknowingly defend it until it is ready. The mysteries here showcase how people can be manipulated into doing, or at the very least being complicit in horrific deeds, and the extent those in power use half-truth and propaganda to further those deeds. And it shows the importance of trying to uncover these mysteries and try to find the truth, and not rely on the descriptions those in power gives to entire groups of people. Not to bring in real-life politics too much, but not taking in the wholesale demonization of certain groups from those in power at face value is kind of resonant right now. Maybe just a little bit, Anyways, I love how the fact that this is a mystery is in service to those themes. Like, it's really cool how, it being a mystery showcases the importance of finding the truth. We also have to remember that the cast are like high school students or college age maybe, literally molded to be weapons of war, showing the struggles and damage the cast endures in service of a goal they don't fully know or understand due to authority and circumstances. That is really compelling stuff. In regards to the characters for the most part I do really like. I think my 3 favorite characters are Nozomi, Tsubasa, and Hirako. Nozomi is pretty integral to the core story, and I think she has such a heart-wrenching dynamic with Takumi, especially in the second scenario. Tsubasa is honestly the GOAT for being really good at creating gadgets to help us out, and honestly just in general being a really good vibe. Her struggles with her vomiting I think were also really compelling, and Hirako is just really badass, but also has her vulnerable side, which is also really compelling. In terms of characters I dislike, Ito is a character I really dislike, but I do appreciate what he brings to the story. Like, he does enhance the story, I think, with his antagonistic character. I just hate his guts. I hate people that, look down on others and has this holier-than-thou vibe that I get from him, despite him also doing some pretty horrific things. But again, I do appreciate what he brings to the story. It's similar to, Nagito or Kokichi from Danganronpa. I know I said I wouldn't delve too deep into a particular route, but I do have to talk about the second scenario, which I definitely feel is the main route. That route is actually peak. It has the biggest momentum when it comes to the mystery reveals, like the stuff I talked about before, and in my opinion, it is the route that has the highest emotional points. I love the dynamic between Takumi and Nozomi. That one scene where on the 41st day, after Takumi helps Nozomi heal her rejection symptoms, and Nozomi thanks him not just for that, but for everything, and gets him to reveal everything, including Karua. Seeing Takumi cry, recounting those memories, and the pan over to Nozomi also crying despite not knowing why, oh my goodness, inject that into my veins. That's good. That's so good. That is such a compelling, emotional, heartfelt moment. But then, with one line in that same scene, with Nozomi saying that it was her uncle that took her in and did the experiments, not her mom, that immediately changed the mood in such a good way, going from feeling heartfelt to super chill-inducing. It's just so masterful. And of course, the ending of that scenario is actually absolute cinema. the cast facing down the protectors of the undying flame, representing the embodiment of humanity, them dying and passing on their hopes to Takumi, having him absorb their cryptoglobin, eventually having Takumi all alone and him, with the ghost of the cast, killing the undying flame. It's peak. It's actually so peak. It is also really sad that Nozomi is the only survivor, and her watching Takumi die in her arms is so tragic and parallels what happens in the first scenario. And the ending cutscene of her struggling travels, eventually finding a group of Futurum children who are scared of her recognizing the weight of being the last human and what humanity has done to the planet, and bowing and reaching her hand out, the Futurum children accepting that, all that while the sun rises. It is such an emotional and effective scene. I love this route so much. It is so good. As I mentioned before, this game has 100 endings, and while most routes I think are at least good to amazing, there are definitely some routes that I did not like. Again, I do think the game is a bit too big for its own good. I think personally, if the game was just the first and second scenarios, I would have totally been fine. I do appreciate most of what the other routes do for fleshing out the world and introducing and resolving other mysteries, but not all of them. Which is funny because there are parts of the world and story that, even with all of that, I think could use some more development. So it would have been better to not have the serial battle route, for example, and instead delve more into the origins of the G and the mysterious lady in the lab coat in SF, or the old guy. I think that would have been better. Despite that though, I thoroughly enjoyed this story. The mystery and world are super compelling, the themes hit really hard, I enjoyed most of the characters, and yeah, I think the story was really good. There were so many moments I had deep chills while playing this, and honestly, outside of Zero Escape, I haven't really felt chills like this since. The story was emotionally compelling and resonant, and I think I'll be thinking about this game for a long time. So yeah, if you can't tell, I really love this game. It's not perfect, and there are definitely aspects that are lackluster, but its strengths are extremely strong and compelling. It really does feel like overall, Kodaka and Uchikoshi took the best parts from each other and combined it into this labor of love. The battle system is so much better than I thought it would be, and the story and themes are very compelling. I definitely give this an S on my mystery tier list and a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I do recommend playing this game, especially if you are a fan of Danganronpa or Zero Escape. If you are daunted by how big the game is and can't commit to doing all of the endings, which is definitely understandable, then what I would recommend is to just do the path that leads to ending 1. As Kodaka says, it is totally fine and expected to not do all the endings, or even a lot of the endings. And in my opinion, doing the path that leads to ending 1 will be totally sufficient in getting a complete story with satisfying mystery reveals and emotional catharsis. There are spoiler-free flowcharts online that you can use to reach it. I'll link to one in the description. If you are willing to commit, I do recommend going in completely blind with no guides, but if you are interested but daunted, then yeah, I recommend at least doing ending 1. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my thoughts on the game. Maybe if this goes well, I can do other content on this game, like going over each route or doing a unit combat tier list, things like that. I do really like this game overall, and I am very glad to be able to experience Kodaka's and Uchikoshi's wild ride again. Hope you all have an amazing rest of the day, and see you all next time. Bye everyone.